Sound.
Okay, so I'll provide a brief overview of today's business. The committee will receive oral evidence from the Department for Infrastructure officials on model licence conditions for caravans and consider 3 statutory rules not subject to assembly procedure. We're very fortunate to have Lewis, who's with me on work experience at the moment, who's in the public gallery. For those that are in the public gallery, you can use your mobile devices through a Wi-Fi connection. All devices should be muted. 3G, 4G and 5G should not be used, and no recordings or photographs are to be taken. So if members are content, we'll proceed through the agenda as follows. There's no apologies, so declarations of interest. Remind members that they are obliged to declare any relevant financial or other interests which might reasonably be thought by others to influence their approach to the matter under consideration. Any members who have interest to declare in relation to today's business should do so now or when the particular matter arises in the meeting. So does any members have any interest that they wish to declare?
I think so.
No? Okay, thank you. Item 3 is Chairperson's business. At its meeting on the 11th of December, the committee noted correspondence from Nicola Mallon, Head of Trade and Devolved Policy from Logistics UK, and agreed to schedule an informal meeting. So due to the committee's workloads, the date proposed by Logistics UK were not suitable. So I just want to seek agreement that the committee staff engage again with Logistics UK to identify some alternative dates with a view to scheduling an informal meeting prior to the Easter recess. Are members content?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Following resumption of business in the last mandate, the executive agreed that a review of arm's length bodies should be conducted in accordance with the commitment made in New Decade New Approach Agreement. The process required individual departments to progress reviews of their arm's length bodies and to bring any significant recommendations for reform to the wider executive for agreement. So I think, as a committee, that we'll maybe write to DFI to seek an update on its approach to review the arm's length bodies and to seek copies of any review reports completed to date. You content?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. At page 135, you'll see that there was an invitation from the Clean Water Sports Alliance to an event on the 2nd of April 2025 in the Long Gallery here in Parliament Buildings, which aims to highlight water quality issues that result in part from wastewater infrastructure and the impact that has on water sports. The event aims to draw attention to the important role that our waterways play for our elite athletes and recreational users alike. Will highlight how water quality issues that result in part from our wastewater infrastructure impact on these sports. The correspondence was in my capacity as chair, so I just obviously for interest transparency bringing it to the committee, and that the committee is content that I hope to attend the event as well. And I think it's open to everybody, but obviously I'm hoping to come as well.
Okay.
All right, everybody agreed?
Expect a full report back to the committee.
There's just 2 other items I wanted to raise myself. One was obviously St Patrick's weekend. I had noted on social media that there was an awful lot of commentary around the lack of transport and taxi provision in and around Belfast city centre. And obviously it's a weekend where people are going out, and not too long ago I was out myself in Belfast city centre, and the difficulties with public transport as well in and around the night time. This committee did look at the business case that was put forward for the nighttime bus in Belfast, and I think maybe it might be worthwhile just if we check in to see where that business case is at with the department at this moment in time, because having that late night bus option is vital, not only for public transport safety but also in terms of the economy of the city centre as well. So are members content that we seek an update on that, or does anybody want to add anything to that?
Can I come in on that? I was out on the Sunday for Newcastle winning the Carabao Cup, the first time in
Let's
70
not
years.
talk about that.
But noticed actually taking
Record that there, please.
joking aside, taking the bus home, the glider stopped at 10 p.m, which I hadn't actually thought about, and thankfully some constituents were able to give me a lift home, but anybody else would have been experiencing an absolute nightmare to get back to their house.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's vital that we try and push the need, because I mean, in a city where we're trying to promote tourism and we do have increase in visitor numbers, it's important that we have that transport offering there for people as well. Cahill?
No, yeah, just seek some clarity, Chair. I mean, are we asking, are we tying in St. Paddy's Day, or is this an issue we're looking at from transport and service and provision itself? And I asked in the context of, if we are tying with St. Paddy's Day, we need to contact in the council what was their plans for that whole bit, you know, the whole 3 days or whatever it was. We may not need to do that. It may be a transport issue per se, but if we could get anything when the council say they are facing these challenges, councillors are getting the same issues, it will enhance the conversation. But if not, if it's only a transport issue, it's a different matter, you know what I mean?
So I'm bringing this up in the context of just seeing obviously commentary over the weekend that it was, but this is an issue every weekend in Belfast.
Sound.
And I
then
think
we could write to the chair.
think
We could write to council as well, Chair, for their view on it. I mean, if or not, I mean.
I think council are supportive of the night, but we can check.
Belfast,
Certainly in
Belfast.
Belfast.
Just get their opinions on what if there's any experiences or any commentary over the weekend, even the councillors to themselves. Yeah. If they want, it's cool.
No,
if they want to respond, sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
just Belfast, Cahill.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the
Yeah.
major issue. I
Yeah.
mean, if you know, they may be contacted as well, Chair. You know.
Yeah. We'll check in with the council, but I think in any event it's important just to check where that business case is at. I'm presuming that the department are waiting on the final budget coming through and all of that, but I think it's important that as a committee we also push on this, because I think it is important. Okay, content with that.
I concur with Peter and the result of the weekend. That was excellent, Peter. Congratulations. They're now 2-army by
Okay, moving on very swiftly. Another thing I want to discuss, which is more serious of nature, is safety of children on school bus routes. Yeah. We will be aware of very recently the very sad and tragic passing of a young girl, and you will have seen her family were in the media this week as well, and the impact that has had. And I know locally in my own constituency the impact of children's deaths coming home on a school bus has had a massive impact on my own community in Fermanagh and South Tyrone. And a parent contacted me just in the last few days and has raised it before in relation to there is a law in the US where when children are coming off school bus that you can't pass a school bus, and that's obviously a major safety policy idea, and obviously this committee is interested in road safety, and I felt that maybe we should just write to the Minister and see if there is any consideration of such policy or legislation like that, like the US model here for Northern Ireland. You know, I'm not saying that it will solve all the issues, but it might be one such idea for the Minister to look at, particularly in the context of road safety. And I know Active Travel, when they were in here on their oral evidence sessions, they talked about schools and road safety and looking at pilots as well. So are the committee content? Does anybody want to add anything in relation to that? Cahill?
Thanks, Sharon. It is something we looked at it, because you're right, in America the arm comes out the side of the bus and you're not allowed to overtake. But probably that aside, and that's a technical issue or an engineering solution, it wouldn't be a bad idea to ask about the actual legislation itself, you know what I mean? And that's where we follow, as opposed to adapt all the buses to
Yeah.
But I would agree with the approach, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
For
you.
members' awareness as well, Chair. 1st of April, the operative group on road safety is going to be meeting, and we're going to have Sam Donaldson in. Members here on the policing board will be aware of who Sam is in terms of road safety, if you want to come along.
And as you know, Sam had given evidence to the committee as well, and he's very knowledgeable, and is an expert, I would say, in his field. So thank you, members, for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, just want to come in on that. Yeah, that young girl obviously lost her life in my constituency. And very, very tragic, but it'd be good to write to the department and find out what legislation is possible for the arm was referred to.
Yeah.
But it's a wider conversation about where children get off buses. You know, you've bus stops, official, and you've unofficial places where buses stop and kids jump off and run into the house or wait and cross the road.
Yeah.
So that's a bigger piece to look at that in the broad, and that's going to be a big change for a lot of people, that there's only going to be a bus stop on A road instead of 5 drops on A road.
Yeah.
So we could maybe widen that out if what the department thinks of that principle.
And whether how often a review takes place of home to school transport stops with, you know, obviously in this context with infrastructure it'll be TransLink, but we might also maybe do you want to also seek to write to the education
It's doing a harm
minister on
transit,
that?
DFI and EA, because
Yeah.
you've driver discretion. You've loads of things in this conversation, you know, that can really widen out. You know, and then to solve one problem, you're going to have a lot of parents travelling a bigger distance for the specific bus stop. So there's a bigger piece of work on all this. But it'd be good to will that kick off that initial to the 3 organisations. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are members content with that? So the approach is to write to the minister to see what legislation or can be enacted here, and then obviously the whether there's a review done or how often that's done in terms of home to school transport drop off and pick up, and that is also to go to the EA education minister side of things, because of the EA buses obviously.
And TransLink as well.
And TransLink as well, yeah. Content with that? Yep. Yeah. Okay, thank you, members. Item 4 is the draft minutes. At page 7, you'll see draft minutes of proceedings of the meeting on the 12th of March 2025. I'm just seeking agreement that members are content that the minutes are true and accurate reflection of the meeting on the 12th of March. If so, I'll sign the minutes now. Content? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Item 5 is matters arising. So do any members have any matters arising from the previous meeting? No? Okay, thank you. Item 6 is correspondence. At page 19 you'll see the correspondence memo. At page 29 you'll see the ministerial response to the committee correspondence requesting quarterly written updates for each division on sickness absence levels. So just want to seek agreement to write to the Department of Finance requesting quarterly updates. Content? Yeah? Okay. At page 131 and 134 is correspondence from a member of the public who also highlights that he is a journalist, and Friends of the Earth requesting a copy of the data relating to announced and unannounced water sample testing as referenced in the course of the oral evidence session we had with NI Water on the 5th of March 2025. So obviously following the meeting, the committee wrote to NI Water on the 11th of March, and as we're still awaiting a formal response. So I just want to seek agreement that we note the correspondence and that the committee staff will provide an interim response to both correspondence advising them that the committee will consider their request upon receipt of the information. So once we get the information ourselves, then we'll take a look at it and then we'll make a decision on setting that out, because obviously we haven't seen how it looks to the committee just yet. Are you content? Mm-hmm. Okay, I just wanted to raise sorry Mark.
And it's related to those items. I suppose there's certainly the letter from Thomas Green who said a journalist. Now, he had run a story on Monday in the Irish News. I didn't get to speak to him beforehand. I think he did try to contact me, but it emanated from that same committee meeting of the 5th of March, when I had asked Northern Ireland Water if they were under investigation by the utility regulator into legal compliance. Now, and I think I kind of asked that two different ways, and I wasn't able to extract an answer either time. But they have since established, or this particular journalist or the Irish News, that there is such an investigation that has been commenced by the utility regulator. So could we write the Northern Ireland Water and ask them for confirmation of that, as well as, I suppose, an explanation as to why they didn't feel that they were at liberty to share that with the committee when they were in before us a couple of weeks ago?
So, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had received evidence from when the utility regulator was in. We did receive evidence that there was enforcement action taking place, but we can check in with NI Water.
A bit of background, I think the utility regulator, when he came and gave evidence, I think in September, had indicated what the process was of how they determine whether, and the legal framework that they operate in for taking enforcement. But I think also NI Water alluded to the fact there had been, I think, 8 instances, I think it was in the evidence on the 5th of March, that there was enforcement action being taken or considered, but that was direct from NI Water. I mean, as Mr. Durkin suggests, the committee could easily write to the utility regulator or to NI Water to get confirmation of whether that is the case in the instance referred.
Mm-hmm. So, Mark, do you want to write to both to check exactly the details of the 8? Yeah.
I think that would be useful to us as a committee.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Item 6.6, which is page 32 of the pack. Obviously, the Minister has come back just to outline the engagement that has taken place between NI Water and her department on the developer-led contributions. I was wondering if the committee felt, I mean, obviously this is a huge issue, and when NI Water were up in front of the committee, it seemed to me like there wasn't very much engagement. So I was thinking maybe could the committee check in to see if those dates actually do align with what has been said and with NI Water to clarify the situation. Are you content with that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So does any members have any comment they wish to raise on any other items of the correspondence in the meeting pack? No? Okay, so just want to seek agreement that members are content to note the remaining correspondences contained in the correspondence memo in the meeting pack. Content? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll now move to item 7, which is the Caravans Act, Northern Ireland, 1963, model licence conditions, Department for Infrastructure oral evidence. At page 137, you'll see the clerk's memo. At page 143, you'll see the cover letter, model licence conditions 2025 DFI. At page 147, you'll see Appendix A, draft model licence conditions for caravan sites, departmental response to public consultation. And at page 189, you'll see Appendix B, model licence conditions for residential sites and holiday sites. And at page 219, you'll see Appendix C, model licence conditions for traveller sites. So we welcome to the committee today Mrs. Rosemary Daly, Director of Regional Planning, Governance and Legislation, Department for Infrastructure, Scott Symington, Senior Principal, Regional Planning, Governance and Legislation, Department for Infrastructure, and Mr. David Docherty, Regional Planning, Governance and Legislation, Department for Infrastructure. You're all very welcome to the committee today. Thank you for your time. Members, I'm just seeking agreement that, as per usual, the evidence is recorded by Hansard. All agreed, yeah? Okay, thank you. As per usual, 5 minutes just to run through about the Caravans Act, and then I'll come to members' questions, so I'll hand it over to yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, members, thank you very much for the opportunity to come today to brief you on the model licence conditions for traveller sites and the model licence conditions for holiday and residential sites. As the Chair has said, I'm the Director for Regional Planning, Governance and Legislation, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Scott Simonton and David Doherty. Under the Caravan Acts, Northern Ireland 1963, the 1963 Act, the development of caravan sites and the physical standards are controlled through planning permission granted for the use of land as a caravan site, and the 1963 Act's site licence system. The licence system is administered by district councils who are responsible for issuing and enforcing site licences. The Department for Infrastructure has a role in providing the definition of the meaning of a caravan as prescribed in the Section 25 of the Caravan Act. It also has a role for the exemption certificates for the requirement to hold a site licence, for example, touring caravan organisations. The Department also provides model licence conditions regulating the layout and provision of facilities, services and equipment for caravan sites, including water supply, electricity and fire points. The former Department for Environment published model licence conditions in 1992 for holiday caravan sites and in 1994 for residential caravan sites. On the 6th of March 2018, the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission published their Out of Sight, Out of Mind Travellers Accommodation in Northern Ireland investigation report. This report recommended the Department for Infrastructure should review the legal and policy framework concerning the site licences. This should include the development of a model site licence setting out the minimum standard of provision and safety requirements for each type of traveller site in the north, along with enforcement powers for any breach. The Department accepted the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission recommendation, and having reviewed the legal and policy framework, is satisfied that the legal framework is satisfactory, and consider while the legislation has been in place for some time, it remains fit for purpose and broadly in line with the other jurisdictions. While addressing the report's recommendations, the Department took the opportunity to consult on model licence conditions for the holiday, residential and travellers' caravan sites into one document. This was considered appropriate as the current conditions in place dated back to 1992 and 1994. So between May and August 2019, the Department consulted on the set of draft model licence conditions encompassing residential, holiday and traveller caravan sites to seek the views of all the interested parties on revisiting and updating the existing model licence conditions. Following consideration of the consultation responses and having fully considered the views from the Human Rights Commission, traveller support groups, and having reviewed the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service guidance, as well as the Department for Communities draft design guidance for travellers' accommodation, the Minister and the Department concluded it was appropriate to revise and update the current model licence conditions by bringing forward two sets of model licence conditions, one for holiday and residential sites and a separate set for model licence conditions for traveller site, which the committee has copies of. The updated licensing conditions represent what normally would be expected as a matter of good practice on all caravan sites and should be applied with regard to particular circumstances of each case, including the physical character of the site, any facilities or services that may be already available within the convenient reach or other local conditions. They also provide explanatory notes, including advice on enforcement to give greater clarity to councils and stakeholders. Chair, that concludes my opening remarks, and we're happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time today. Obviously, there is a lapse in time from the consultation which took place in 2019, and therefore, what assurances can the Department give that the further changes to the conditions are not required as a result of anything that's happened in the interim period of time?
Well, we have conducted during this period, we have been in contact with representatives from the holiday sector, British Holiday and Home Parks Association, and provided them with updates. They have raised concerns, but they're the same concerns as were raised in the consultation back in 2019, and we have been in regular contact and updated them on our position. We've also been in contact regularly with councils around this, and the councils are keen for the new conditions to be published. They're an update on what was previously there, and provide a lot more clarity and advice on enforcement as well. Also, the fire guidance in 2018 is still current, and the design guide, the DFC's design guide, is still current, and we complement both those sets of advice.
So do you feel that you've been adequately, you said the holiday sector still had some concerns and you were able to update them on your position. What exactly was that position, and do you feel that you've been able to allay those concerns within that holiday sector?
The holiday sector have a number of concerns around maybe some spacing concerns, some of the wording of the new model licence conditions, that conditions aren't retrospectively put on them. On meetings I've tried to reassure them that that's not the case. This is not a major change, it's an update. Yes, the language has changed, and I think within our consultation response we have answered many of the queries and accepted some of the holiday sector points and updated the conditions accordingly.
So what were those points specifically that were updated then, just for clarity?
There'll be one around, there's a 3 metre separation distance between the border of the caravan site and any caravan. We have allowed flexibility within that because we accept that there may be sites that 3 metres isn't necessary. I mean, that 3 metres is there for a number of reasons: privacy, fire safety, enjoyment of a site, but there could be sites within the holiday sector that those aren't issues because of where they're situated. So we've allowed flexibility within that to use language like where appropriate is what the holiday sector were inclined for us to do.
So was that really the only?
No, there's probably...
How many other changes would you say have been?
They were concerned in the consultation where we had allowed a 3 metre distance of parking a car that had to be at least 3 metres from an adjoining caravan. Again, we have withdrawn that 3 metre and left that up to the council within consultation with the owner, depending on the caravan site, because that 3 metre might be a condition that couldn't be met within a caravan site, because I think there's a separation distance at stages of 5 metres. So if you also then required a 3 metre separation distance, that may not be possible. So that's more in discussion for councils and the caravan site owner to see if that's appropriate or not. But there would be minor ones within it. I think we changed for cutting, some simple ones like cutting grass, how you think reasonably the conditions had said that all had to be removed, but I think some practices are that it's better just to leave the cut grass, so we've done some very minor things around that.
But just add that there's circumstances when these conditions will be considered, and obviously these conditions are only considered when you're applying for a new licence, applying for licence for new sites, applying licence conditions to sites that have already been substantially redeveloped, and reviewing or renewing or reviewing a current licence. So it's not that you would retrospectively go in without a reason to...
Our position would really be that if the licence that's currently there is fit for purpose, you don't need to go in and issue them a new licence.
Yeah.
And if there are any conditions that you think do need changing, for example, phone coverage, I think we've gone, if there's mobile phone coverage, you don't need to provide a telephone for emergencies because of the coverage. And things like that they're done on a gradual basis, and that you do it in discussion with the site owner. And if there is a new condition, you give them an appropriate amount of time to put that condition in place.
You were saying there that obviously you've been in contact with councils and they're broadly happy across the 11 councils. Do you think it provides a wee bit more uniformity for councils across the board?
Yeah, I think it also provides them more flexibility. There's more guidance there, there's more information. What's new about these conditions are the explanatory notes. They weren't in the previous. So we tried to, within the explanatory notes, give councils and site owners and whatever a bit more information, and especially around enforcement, because that was an issue that came up quite regularly. But we've also tried, we don't want them to use this as a one-size-fits-all and just, this is the site licence, like I think possibly might have happened with the 1992 and 94. We want them to look at the site and see what's appropriate for that site.
Can I also just check? Obviously, the correspondence back in the consultation back in 2019 was actually extended. What were the reasons for that?
Not off the top. I think a couple of the organisations requested that it could be extended, and it seemed illogical to allow it. Off the top of my head, I don't know the exact reason, but I know we received a couple of emails. I think a couple were from councils and one from outside. I think it was one of the residential park associations that needed a bit more time, and we just thought there was no need not to extend it. Okay, and then also in terms of the conditions that compare with other jurisdictions, during your whenever you were talking there, you said it's broadly in line with other jurisdictions. Yeah. How broadly is it in line with other jurisdictions? Well, there are differences. For residential sites, Wales and England updated theirs in 2008. These conditions were not based on those, but took a lot of information or the set out of the 2008 conditions in England and Wales. Scotland updated their residential sites in 2018, as far as I remember. The holiday conditions in England, Wales and Scotland still date back, I think 1990s Scotland and I think 1989's England. So they're still, but what they do is say that councils should take account of modern practices. So ours are probably a step further because we have updated both. And there are differences, there will be some difference, but with regard to spacing, the bulk of this is around spacing for safety and whatever. They are pretty consistent throughout all the jurisdictions. I don't think they will vary at all. Okay. I'm going to move on at this juncture. Deputy Chair, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks so much for the answers so far. The Chair's covered most of the most pressing points, but just in relation to traveller sites, you obviously said it was a separate model, licensing conditions, and that has been the case for quite some time. Just wondering what the Department's rationale for that is, the health and safety concerns that you referred to, and what engagement there's been so far with traveller support groups around any of those changes.
Right. Well, we had a lot of correspondence at the time with the traveller support groups and the Human Rights Commission. Most of the travellers' concerns that were raised in the consultation were really addressed by the DFC's design guide, because that takes more account of the cultural needs. Why we've probably produced a separate model for the travellers. Prior to 2003, councils were responsible for traveller sites, so they didn't require a site licence because councils were exempt. So in reality, the 1994 conditions didn't really reference or have any mention of travellers because it didn't apply. So when we seen the replies from these groups and saying they would want a separate, and there were some differences between the two, we thought it would be better splitting them, because in the travellers groups we refer quite a bit to the design guide because that's what we want to complement. That's probably the main document for the traveller sites, and we want these site licence conditions to align with them. So to me it was more clarity for councils that there would be a separate site or a separate set of conditions.
But in the back of the consultation then, those concerns have been addressed?
Yes, they were raised in the responses from the traveller support groups and the Human Rights Commission.
Okay.
And we've addressed those.
That's perfect. Moving on then, the Department raised concerns about, the holiday caravan sector raised concerns about not wanting a broad brush sort of approach for their sector. I'm just wondering, I know you touched on this with the Chair, but why you thought the Department felt that this was a more civil approach rather than having specific rules for the caravan sector, for that sector itself, for the holiday sector, sorry?
Again, the residential, the 1992 and 1994 conditions for the two separate, if you read them, are almost identical. So it didn't seem appropriate to do another two separate. And within the combined one, we have tried to give the flexibility that the holiday sector want. And the councils should talk to the owners, consider, discuss, and bring it forward appropriate conditions that are justifiable. But there didn't seem it didn't seem justifiable to bring two separate sets when they are very similar.
You would just be duplicating the same information,
Okay.
whereas the travellers' model licensing conditions are slight variations, so it was just easier for anyone to pick up on what are the differences. in each document. So.
No problem. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks for coming along, David, Rosalie, and Scott. I have a couple of questions. Do you see this guidance, I presume, or for caravan? I'm just coming to the start of this here. So residential sites and holiday sites. So if I went to build a caravan park tomorrow, for example, okay, which I don't plan to do, but say I did, is the council effectively, who issues that licence to me, or who issues that licence?
So they're fully responsible for issuing and enforcing site licences.
And this conditions is what I follow to build my caravan park.
Councils must have regard to them.
Okay.
Councils can go above them, or but they have to have regard to them.
So if I don't adhere to this, say I build it correctly, and something happens in a few years and there's something wrong, who polices this?
Council.
Right. Who polices them?
Well, I mean, as in any council function, they have
So if I do it incorrectly, my holiday park's not designed right, or some issue, they'll come on to me and say, residents of your holiday park have complained about the way you've done something, Keith, you need to address this.
But the owner is responsible for ensuring these licence conditions are met. If the licence conditions aren't met, then the council have considerable powers within the 1963 Act to gain entry, to enforce. Again, if you were a resident in a caravan park and something wasn't good done, your first right would go to the council.
Would the council have they powers to fine me, or what powers would they have if
The council don't fine you, but yes, you could go to court and face a fine.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're the
they're the
policing authority.
They're the enforcement.
So back
body.
to my question: who polices them? Because fundamentally, council has probably lots and lots, if not hundreds, of caravans on their own sites in Northern Ireland. So
it is the legislation that's produced by the department, so there's an ultimate responsibility back on the department to ensure that they are implemented.
But if there is an issue with the caravan site and the residents are raising this as an issue, at some stage, there are things that they go to the council. Council have a responsibility if this has been raised with them to address it.
I suppose my point is, if I wasn't doing something correctly and the council will be coming down to me and saying you need to address this and you need to address it quickly. Yeah. So the reason I'm coming to this, back on the 24th of February, 230 static caravans and 90 touring caravan plots had a catastrophic failure on the north coast on a council-owned site. As to date, they're not. Some may be reinstated, but as to date, there's still dozens of caravans with no power. So my point is, who is policing them? Because fundamentally, people have paid, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but people have paid for that pitch, big money, but the council is very relaxed, so who is policing them?
Well, that
used?
No, that would be, councils don't require a site licence. Councils are exempt from having a site licence, so there won't be any licence conditions on a council park. They do have to have regard to the model licence conditions, and they do have a responsibility for all other legislation. I mean, if this falls under some other legislation on health and safety, the councils have a responsibility, and if they're not meeting that responsibility, it should be.
So they don't require a licence?
No, councils are exempt under the Caravans Act.
Okay. So effectively, they don't have to take any of this?
They have to have regard to the model licence conditions. They don't need a site licence.
So the council can fine somebody for not complying with this, but they don't have to.
Well, yes, the council can enforce conditions on other caravan sites, but they don't have a site licence themselves. No.
Okay. So, who does Joe Public go to if they can't get power in their site for months and they're still paying the council? What direct people do they go to and say, I'm paying, council doesn't have power to my site, and they're saying it's going to be months? Who do they go to?
They wouldn't have to go to the council.
But the council is their own.
They have to go through the complaints procedure and what's standing there. The council are the responsibility, have the responsibility.
Yes, but surely you've entered into a contract with the council when you've put your caravan on a council site. So obviously there should be a caveat set out who's responsible for what in that contract.
There are some protections through the 2011 Caravans Act, which is DFC's legislation with regards to possibly things like that, protections for people that
they're fundamentally policing themselves to a degree.
With regard to site licences, yes, but not. I wouldn't say with regard to any of those. They don't have a site licence, but they still have a responsibility, and they still have to take account of the model licence conditions. And they are subject to all other legislative.
So if you were talking to some of those people that as no parent can't use the caravan that they're paying for, it's like renting a home, but fundamentally not allowed in. What would you say to them to do today?
Well, to me, that would come in under that's the protections that I think would be under the 2011 Caravans Act.
Who do they go to?
I wouldn't have
I'm not
that
put,
deep.
I
No, I know what you mean.
I'm not going to put you in the spot, but you know, think of those people paying, and you go to the council account and say, well, it's going to be a few months.
But that could be the same as if you could have no electricity in your house for a few months. You still have
Well,
to go to, you know.
Well, you would be making an effort to get it sorted.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And if that was a private site, they'd be making a somewhat different effort. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming in. I suppose sort of going back on the sort of delay between the review in 19 and now, you know, will there be, when's the built-in period of review for this, if that makes sense, and what are the, you know, should there be unintended consequences? You know, it's all well and good us sitting here discussing this, but then someone in South Down, or as Keith says, you know, we'll be inundated possibly whenever these issues come to pass, if that makes sense. So when's the review? When's, you know, what? You know?
The department can review these model licence conditions at any time. If we publish these and there is highlighted that there's an issue and that condition is not relevant, the department can review that and update it and change it. I mean, the department has power to produce these model licence conditions as and when.
Okay. And then sort of following on from that, you know, what is the, you know, should site owners have this review? I mean, you've stated that it's, you know, you think it'll only be in new licensed sites or highly redeveloped licensed sites, but, you know, what are the, you know, should a operator of a site have unintended consequences and unintended fees because of this? Well, how does that build into this?
Site owner has a right of appeal against any condition.
Right.
And that would go through the court proceedings. The one condition that would come to the department is opening periods. That appeal would come to the department. All other appeals would go through the court proceedings.
Okay. So if there was an issue, then the advice would be that's okay, and that would go.
There should be, before a new condition comes in, there should be a period of discussion between the council and the site owner, and then there should be a period of feed-in to that condition takes effect. Once the condition is issued, then the site owner has 28 days to appeal that decision or appeal that condition.
Again, going on from Keith as well, would be council, department, legal. Would that be the hierarchy there? Would it be?
No, well, the department wouldn't be involved in that appeal at all. The department would only be involved in the appeal around opening hours. Any other appeal would be through the courts.
Okay. Just reading through it there, you know, the three sections: traveller sites, holiday caravan sites, and council departmental bodies. Is there an opinion or whatever of your department? You know, there's a lot of stuff is made there about the space between sites and the space between boundaries and such like. I think, you know, this was carried out in 2019, and the world changed significantly in the interim period, and we've seen a lot more camper vans, which are, by the definition as I read it, caravans. Will these, or does the department have any opinion on, you know, we're seeing up and down the country camper vans coming into public car parks and such, of which there is no spacing and such. I mean, will these regulations give councils any more power to regulate camper vans on public car parks?
No, you can't. Public car parks, a council car park cannot be a caravan site, and they can't allow it. They would need to do a planning application for change of use.
No, but will these regulations, or does the department have an opinion on how that can be enforced to prevent these risks, which are essentially there by your own admission about fire risks and spaces between?
The fire advice and what's in these model licence condition aligns with the fire guidance, and basically that fire guidance, although it was updated in 2018 at the time, we said is as relevant now as it was in 1994, and the spacing hasn't changed. Now they have took account of some different materials that are used within caravans and different things, but if you're talking about car parks, I mean, car parks aren't caravan sites, and they should not be used as caravan sites.
That's the point. Will these regulations, or what does the department have an opinion on the fact that they are now sort of de facto?
Well, we have at an earlier stage written to a number of councils to explain the situation and what they require to do if they want to make their car park a caravan site.
I'm talking about the inverse of that. If they don't want to just quite so much.
They would have that's council's powers to regulate their car park.
Just as David has indicated, each site would have to have planning permission before you'd actually issue a licence. So there's already a rigour that's provided through that process. So you just can't park and use any piece of public
You can't have a caravan site without a site licence to start off with, and you can't have a site licence without planning permission. So there are processes on the way through. You're talking about illegally using a car park as a caravan site.
I'm just talking about the prevalence now that there is.
Yeah.
That there's just quite an awful lot.
That's up to councils to police and make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, so the two regimes that control the development of caravan sites is the planning system, and these regulations are the site licensing system, which is more about amenity and layout and standards, whereas the planning system looks at the land use. So if there are unauthorised sites going on, then the council would use its planning enforcement powers, or else seek a planning application for it.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Cahill, I have you down on my list.
Chair, it's all the questions I think have been asked as well interrogated. I mean, the two things I would say in all of this here, you know, and listen to some of your answers. Obviously, we've included as many people in the consultation as possible, and that's the main thing, to get the message out, to converse with those people and ensure we're bringing the right regulations. I suppose, and I take it you've done all of that, and obviously I can see, but two questions probably the main principle. I mean, I was trying to listen in, the actual main principle for bringing this forward, I would ask you that, you know what I mean, what we've learned and how we're trying, is it good practice across other jurisdictions, the main principle, and like I say to you, you know, have you learned from a best model somewhere else to introduce this in? You know, that's my two main points probably.
Well, to say this review happened because of the Human Rights Commission report, and that gave us the opportunity to look at the 92 and 94 conditions that were, they were still serving a purpose, but they were language-wise and different out of date. So in developing, we looked at the position in the other jurisdiction and the updated conditions that were brought forward in England, Wales. We looked at the position in Scotland. We looked at the consultation responses. We had a wide range of consultation responses. We didn't from the residential sector, but we captured those in DFC's review of the 2011 Act. We met with the residential sector at that stage. Their issues were all around enforcement, who's in charge of enforcement. So the explanatory notes at the back, to me, are probably the biggest change and the most useful change to councils, to residents, to site owners.
But I take it then, just quickly, Chair, I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be a multi-agency approach anyway, enforcing it, whatever the no matter whose responsibility is, it's going to take a you know, I suppose you've answered most of the questions, to be honest with you. I mean, thank you very much.
Thank you, Cahill. Deputy Chair, I think you
Yeah,
were
thanks, Chair.
looking
Just wanted to follow up on the point that Andrew raised. I think you came back to it, David, in regards to opening times. So all other aspects of this are enforceable by the council as the regulatory.
Well, the council does it all, but if there's an appeal on an opening times, it would come to the department under 1963 Act.
So I have a caravan. The caravan owner decides to shut between October and March.
Yeah, you wouldn't. It's a caravan site owner has the right of appeal.
Okay.
So say he had a site that he wanted to open all year round.
Yes.
But he's only been allowed to open March to September.
Okay.
And he thinks that's unfair because there's maybe another site somewhere else that's open now. That appeal would come to us.
Okay.
We would then go through the process. We would contact council. We would see what the layout is, and then we would make the decision. And if we go in the site owner's favour, then we inform the council to alter that condition.
Okay, so you would extend potentially the
we could
the
extend
times. What about then for the owner of the caravan itself within it? Where does he or she go to?
Me again, that's under probably more of the protections under the 2011 Act.
If a caravan site owner, for example, decided that they want to shut an extra month a year during a time when the person had the contract, they would take it to the council, or is there any arbitration?
Well, if it's a breakman contract, that would go through whatever legislation. It wouldn't be.
They could take
this.
civil action effectively, but there would be no departmental
No,
interference in that.
not through the 1963 Caravans Act, nor
Okay.
through the model licence conditions.
It's just something that has been raised with me before,
Yeah.
but their first protocol would be to the council,
Yeah.
effectively, to begin
Getting
with.
standards, maybe, I don't know, whatever, if there's a break in the
Okay.
contract.
Okay.
But that the 63 Act's out with that. That's not
Yes.
anything that model licence conditions or the 63 Act covers.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Cathal, you were looking back in.
Yeah, just quickly, as I was thinking, obviously this will inform, it certainly will inform the new area plans, because going forward it'll help in the, you're saying about land use and everything else. I'm sure that'll be. I don't know whether that's coming up in the consultation, but I'm sure. I'm just thinking that's probably the
There's no doubt in a lot of the assessment that is carried out at a planning application, such as the timescales and opening and position and layout and amenity issues. They're all planning considerations. So this is actually like a duplication under the Caravans Act, but it will supplement, and I suppose thankfully powers are with the councils, so there should be some consultation within the councils as to what was considered in the planning process. So
Ideally, the new plans coming forward will identify specific sites for these things, and obviously the housing executive, who now have responsibility for the travellers' sites, again, that would be part of the plan process,
it all up
identifying
under
those
the new
sites.
plan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
really this
Thanks.
is bringing everything really up to date and current, and as David has indicated, provide a good explanation as to why they're there. So
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
No problem. I just want to check, Mark or Nicola, are you okay? You're okay? I just wanted to come back and pick up on a point. Whenever you were talking there, you'd said that once a licence is agreed, there's an applicability. So where applicable in terms of the spacing and that type of thing. So once a licence has been agreed, and say for example spacing has changed then in that afterwards, obviously somebody could come back and say, well, it was applicable at that moment in time, not applicable now. Where does that sit then?
The majority of spacing won't change. The distance between caravans is probably set because there's fire guidance and there's these. The example I was trying to give you there is that some sites may be overlooking the sea, if you know, so there wouldn't be a fire risk. So to tell a site owner you must be 3 metres from that fence is probably unreasonable, if you know what I mean. So it's just to give councils flexibility to look at the site, the particular site, and to see if a site owner thinks it's beneficial not to have that 3 metres used because there is no privacy issue, there is no fire safety issue, that there's 3 metres of space I might be able to utilise for the benefit of my customers. And a council can look at that. I think the new conditions give them the ability to be flexible and look at it. I don't see it as a happening on an ongoing basis.
it takes account really of the site-specific elements of a site, so that gives that.
So by using some of the language we've used is really to give the holiday sector flexibility where it's warranted, but the council has to justify it. You know, the council has to stand over it. So ultimately, the council might even go, no, I still want. You know, that's a council's decision. They have to stand over any site licence they issue.
So, so in an ideal world, right, the licence has been agreed, and I'm not saying that this is the case, but you know there may be some site owners that may bend the rules, and I'm looking at it from a perspective of, you know, will the council then? It's up to the council then to go to make sure they review. Exactly, that the conditions of the licence have been adhered to.
The council have the powers to do it. The council have the powers of entry. The council, you know,
The council can go in and actually do works and then recover the
in
costs.
theory, the council can actually do the works themselves. They have the power to do that if the site owner isn't doing it. I'm not sure that would happen or has happened, but the powers are there within the 63 Act to give the council.
The councils can review the conditions in themselves, but in consultation with. But the onus is on the council.
The ones. I mean, if it comes about that the site licence has been issued and they think one of these conditions isn't working, well then the site owner and the council can go in to discussion, and that condition can be changed.
Going back to Keith's point, it just seems like councils have an awful lot of the power, and they're, they have to sort of, they don't have to have this licence in place, yet have to have due regard for it. And it just seems to me that that creates a bit of a tier. Is that not something that has come up with some of the
yes.
if you don't mind to finish, just in terms of, has that come up with some of the businesses and some of the holiday and residential caravan parks as a concern? Because as somebody looking at it from my point of view, if I was a site owner and a business person, that would be a concern of mine, that I see the council could operate literally on a site beside mine, yet there's nobody sort of reviewing what they are doing.
Well, that has, yes, there is, that the Caravan Association or the caravan holiday site owners would argue, and rightly argue, that they're probably in a unique position within the UK, because they're probably, here's the only area they're in competition with councils in the side by side. But having said all that, council's caravan site still has to satisfy all the health and safety legislation. It still has to abide by the fire guidance. It still has to have regard model conditions. You're not going to go, I mean, they need to give the same enjoyment, privacy, safety to people on their sites. They're not, they can't suddenly put caravans 3 metres between each other. They're still bound heavily by all the regulation. And I understand where the holiday sector are coming from, and yes, it is correct, they are in competition, but I would assume councils want successful holiday sites in their council area, because it brings in income, brings in tourists. So I don't.
And the council will also want a successful council site.
Yes, they will.
It brings them income. So you can see where there is direct competition.
Yeah.
You're right in the sense that councils are exempt from their own sites from licensing. They're also take through their own planning applications for county use. So you're right in that perception, and it has been picked up by the private owners. But again, I suppose the councils, that is the reality of the.
It's the reality of it, and I don't know how much leeway it gives them to relax anything, because it is all very structured, and they can't ignore the model licence conditions. All right, they don't have a site licence, but they can't just ignore them.
Do you not think there's maybe a case for the department or a department then to make sure that the councils have oversight over what they are doing, because they just have to adhere to it?
Yeah.
And I understand what you're saying there in terms of, it's health and safety, councils will want to ensure X, Y and Z. But I just think it is creating a clear two-tier type system.
There's a number of exemptions under the 63 Act. Motorhome groups are exempt from a site licence under many different occasions. A pub, in theory, can allow one caravan to stay in its car park a night they're exempt from the site licence. So there are a number of exemptions throughout the Caravans Act. But the council must, if it is providing a caravan park, it must get the department's approval for any caravan site. It has to seek our approval under the 63 Act. So there are some balance and checks in there, but yes, you are right, and the holiday sector do see this as an unfair competition.
Can I check there? I think you had said, I'm sorry if I'm quoting you wrong, I think you'd said there that is different to other UK jurisdictions in terms of council, and no, did you say that it is still in line with the rest?
Local planning authorities in the other jurisdictions are exempt from site licences.
Okay.
I'm not aware that a lot of local councils in England run holiday sites, and that's maybe what the information we got from the holiday sector was, that Northern Ireland might be the only place that happens, but no, councils are exempt in England, Scotland and Wales as well. Okay.
Members, I don't have anybody else indicating, unless there's any other questions. Okay. Look, thank you very much for your time. You've got off well there in terms of time. And look, we appreciate your time and coming to us today to provide the evidence to the committee. Much appreciated. Thank you.
I'm going back now to Holly Park. I'm going back to Holly Park now, Chair. All right, Keith.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, I just want to check, was there anything that members wanted to raise following that with the department, or anything else that we wanted to check up? Keith, you all right?
Again.
You, oh.
I'm leaving now.
I think, Chair, maybe while Keith thinks, because it made a very valid point about
you.
councils policing themselves, particularly for those involved in that situation where it must be hellishly frustrating. I'd like to get a flavour too for how councils have adapted to any changes, if there has been any additional requirements on them, or if it has been plain sailing. It's just to say there's a gap between legislation coming down and enforcement and regulation being
Over
applied.
the last 6 years, I mean, from the first set of conversations, I mean, obviously the finalised stuff there, but just see what's been going on. I mean, just.
So is your proposal to write to all the councils to check?
Yeah, just to see whether it is all as plain sailing as they say. I know they were consulted, but second to that, I'm sure Keith wants to come in on. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
You see, if that was I'm talking about this specific one of the power outages, okay? There's dozens of caravans with no power. They can use them, my understanding, not on January, but weekends, and then from the 14th of March all week. Then people can't use them. If that was private sector, they'd be doing it working night and day to get that power restored, right? But that's not what's happening in council, because there's nobody to enforce them. There's nobody to put pressure on to do it. But if that was private sector, they would. So how do we police that? I just don't know what question to ask. Probably back on the back of John's point.
Any issues, yeah.
Write to council and say,
council, yeah.
Broadly, how does this affect them or not affect them? And but it is very much. The council seems to have the ball at their own toe in those caravan parks. And if you misbehave, you're out. And by the way, you're paying X. If you don't pay it, we get somebody else in, because people's queuing up to get caravans. But there's nobody policing them.
Yeah. And do you want to check in the department on that to see if there's any worth of seeing who actually places the councils in relation to their
What do you call
caravan parks?
the overarching caravan body? I can't remember the name of them. It's like a British. There's an organisation. It'd be good to have a conversation with those, or a question to those. It's like an overarching body. Holiday parks, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's actually
It is referenced in the
It'd
document.
be good
referenced
to
in
speak
the
to them, because
document.
they would know a lot of detail about who's complaining to them about X, Y, and Z. That's their field.
Yeah.
It's not mine certainly, but
No, absolutely.
it'd be good to
Just
ask
get
them.
it- just
a broader
get a bit-
overview. What's the difference between council owned, privately owned? What issues do they get? Blah blah blah.
Get some written correspondence from them. Cahill, sorry, I think you were in.
Oh no, I would agree with that approach. I mean, we're just trying to find out what has happened. I mean,
What's going on out there in
what's
that
going on out there,
world?
especially because 2 or 3 people had asked the time frame there. There may be a bit of learning from it now. You understand me? And things may have changed. So let's get a wee bit of ask the right questions, the right people. I think certainly the council's one, that overarching body's another. Then we'll see. We'll come back and then we'll go to the department, because some people may say there's a few issues raised his head. So let's see how that goes first. Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew said.
Just, I mean, I appreciate it's maybe not quite connected to the thing, but there did seem to be a bit of a disconnect between the regulations applicable to caravan sites and yet what is going on in the general public sphere, if that makes sense. It didn't quite connect with me how you have to have X amount of space for fire safety, and yet as we go about, as I'm sure it's in your consistency in North Coast too, and that there is an issue with caravans on public car parks, and it does create a bit of a public get a bit annoyed at it. Certainly and I don't know what to do with it really.
It's particularly the case in terms of motorhomes rather than
but it does fall
caravans.
they are defined by
That's
caravans.
classified. Yeah, that's
I mean, again, it's just again, it's not sure but there just seem to be a shrug of shoulders there. You know what I mean? But just there does seem a bit of a loophole there, or black hole there. I don't know what the answer is by any stretch of imagination. But
he was saying there, Chair, to be fair, there's regulation to deal with that, but there's no harm in asking the question if we can form it right, just to whoever need to do. You understand? If you need to go to the department, because council has some responsibility for some car parks. It's how you ask the question. I understand where it's coming from.
I think it might be something that might be borne out
Through
in the
the
council
original question,
correspondence
Okay,
as well, and maybe we can angle
Yeah,
our
no.
correspondence to see if that's the case. And I'm also going to say that we set a time scale for the councils to come back, because we don't want this to. We've seen in other correspondence, it takes a bit of time too for the councils to come back, so we want to get some information fairly soon back from the councils too, if you're in agreement with that as well.
It'll be interesting to see, Chair, because one of the reasons for this is to have a unified approach across the board, to see how, if there are 11 different versions of uniformity, or whether there's actual uniformity.
Well, I just thought it was interesting, because whenever I did ask about whether this will create over the 11 councils, they said, well, this creates flexibility, and flexibility for me means that different councils are doing different
postcode
things.
Lottery is what it creates.
Postcode lottery in terms of your site and your caravan, and everything seems to be, yes, and I can understand,
Well,
it's
sure, that's
good
the
to
point.
give a bit of
you have an older
flexibility.
established site there, and that you need it. What do you do? Ask them to take half an acre of it to comply with certain. Let's find out what they come back and say. I understand what.
All right, content with that. Any other issues anybody wants to raise at this moment in time on it? Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll now move on to item 8, which is subordinate legislation. SR is not subject to assembly procedure. So there are 3 statutory rules that are not subject to assembly proceedings and are not required to be laid. These are at pages 249 to 261 of the meeting pack, and are the SR 2025-48, the Loading Bays on Roads Amendment Northern Ireland 2025, SR 2025-51, the Traffic Weight Restriction Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2025, and the SR 2025-54, the Road Races Tour of the Spurns Order Northern Ireland 2025. So just remind members that the committee noted the proposals for the statutory rule at its meeting on the 5th and 12th of March 2025. So are members content to note the statutory rules?
Right.
Keith?
Just 2025-51, this traffic weight restriction. What is that? Is that purely Amendment 2 adding on another road?
Let me just get it up here. Or do you
It's the
want to
Parkgate
come in?
one. It's the Parkgate one, I think it is. It's the one maybe that you'd raised issues with before, Keith, and we have written to the department.
Parkgate, is that Antrim?
Antrim. Yeah.
Where was the other one? Was it? It was at Ballymena.
Yeah.
I think it was a different one, wasn't it? It was a 7.5 ton weight restriction on a road outside Ballymena. I can't remember the name of the road now. So is that putting Grange Road, Route C40 Parkgate onto a 7.5 ton weight restriction? Because it doesn't like you tell me what that's doing.
Well, do you want us to check?
I'm just conscious of these 7.5 ton weight restriction things. I'm not saying that's the same, but I'm just conscious. You fire that out, you block the road, and they never fix it.
Yeah. So we can check.
Yeah.
We had written, as you know, on
the
the previous, Okay, content with that? Okay. Content to note the statutory rules? Yeah. And Keith, hopefully we'll get a response back soon on it. Okay, thank you. Item 9 is the forward work programme. At page 263, you'll see the draft forward work programme. So just obviously want to seek agreement that we proceed with the evidence sessions as set out in the draft forward work programme and reflect any decisions that were taken today. Are you content?
Content.
Okay. Item 10 is any other business. So I just want to ask, does any members have any other items of business they want to raise? No? Yes?
I have a meeting coming up locally with a road service with the director of this active travel stuff. There seems to be an issue where, and I have no issue personally with active travel, I've said that, but it seems to be they don't deal with the difficult active travel ones. They just spend money on a simple footpath up the side of a road and they're ticking the box for active travel. So there needs to be a degree of why you're not connecting those 50 houses to the village.
Yeah.
Because it's a difficult corner and you might have to vest land, but you can go up the side of an A29 main road and put a footpath to nowhere and spend a lot of money quickly. So I have concerns about that. That active travel money has not been spent wisely. That's my personal opinion. So I just want to raise that. I'm going to have a meeting locally about this with some specifics that they're going to do, but I can't understand why they're not doing the ones that are more difficult. So they're spending money quickly as a box ticking exercise, but it's not the right way to go about spending the money correct.
Yeah, I would have concerns around some of that as well. I see it being a rural constituency, you see it sometimes where, as you say, a footpath is created, but it doesn't actually connect to anywhere, and that's not the purpose of what active travel should be. We should be connecting.
And that money can't be spent, my understanding, on existing footpaths. And why not? There's footpaths with potholes that you can't spend active travel money on, but you're building a footpath to nowhere. It's just crazy.
Well, do you want to check that in?
Well, I have a couple of guys coming up, I think there's a few ladies as well, kind of a local meeting just to look at a few examples. But I need to get a better understanding, why are they spending active travel wisely? And I'm not against active travel, but there needs to be a bit more flexibility where it goes.
Yeah.
And spend it sensibly.
So do you want to wait until, but you're just raising
I'm
that
just
as a
raising the point
point.
about active travel broadly, and the amount of money's going into it quickly to get rid of it as a box ticker, but it's not the right thing to do at times.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful? So I'm chair of the operating group on cycling as well, and we had Peter McParland in recently, updating us on what the department's doing in terms of active travel, and he answered that point from a couple of people. Would it be helpful to get them in, because I think we've had Sustrans in previously, and somebody else from the department, but that's about a year or so ago now. Would it be helpful maybe to get them in and see what their plans are?
Yeah, I think when Colin Woods, I think, was up as well, that was January time? January time, we'd sort of had a bit of a discussion around it, but yeah, we can get more detail on that.
Set up specifically to deal with that.
Yeah. Okay. Content? Any other items of business that anybody wants to raise? Okay, thank you, members. Okay, item 11 is the date, time and location of the next meeting. The next meeting will take place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday the 26th of March in room 25 here in Parliament Buildings. Thank you, everybody, and I now adjourn the meeting.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29. Sound.